Tonight on News 5 Live, Prime Minister Dean Barrow and Leader of the Opposition provide details on the state of emergency. It begins Wednesday at midnight. Thereafter, businesses will shutter between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. We'll tell you about the business activities to remain open in the weeks ahead. More than $140 million have been secured to fight COVID-19. Attorney Arthur Saldivar is arrested by Belmopan police for firearm charges. He's yet to be charged, and his attorney D.K. Bradley says that Saldivar is a political prisoner. And the Fisheries Department makes a sizable lobster bust. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast. evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Tuesday, March 31st. I am Marlene Cuellar. Belizeans across the country continue to prepare for a nationwide shutdown to come into force on Thursday morning. Tonight, there is more clarity on the latest COVID-19 response and how government's decision to effect a sweeping state of emergency will affect everyone for the next 30 days. It is mandated that persons who are not considered essential workers must stay off the streets between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., nighttime hours that have been designated for a countrywide curfew. Additionally, there are 3 classes of business activities which have been okayed by government to remain open during the lockdown. We begin our newscast with Prime Minister Dean Barrow expanding on the imminent state of emergency during a press conference held in Belize City this morning.
There are going to be 3 categories into which business activities will be placed. One is the category of closure. You know that already under the previous statutory instruments, there were some businesses that were obliged to shut down. Under the state of emergency, the list of businesses that must be closed will be expanded, greatly expanded. And so there's that first category of businesses that must close, a category, I repeat, that will have to be expanded in terms of the number of businesses required to be closed. It has to be expanded from what it currently is. That's number one. Number 2 then will be the category of businesses that are allowed to open and to conduct their activities during prescribed daylight hours. There will be some differentiation there. For example, government offices will close at 4. The AG will tell you the hours of closing for other businesses that are allowed to remain open. And finally, there is going to be the category of essential services. The distinction between the essential services and the generalized category of businesses allowed to remain open is that essential services are going to be able to operate during curfew hours when the other regular businesses that are open will not be able to operate.
In light of government's recent announcement of a countrywide lockdown, there have been dozens of business owners reaching out to the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in an attempt to have their doors remain open during the state of emergency. Many of those concerns are not deemed to be essential services, and as such, they will also have to bear the consequences of economic losses.
And I imagine so too has the Leader of the Opposition, I have been bombarded with requests from people to have their business activities declared either essential services or to ensure that their business activities not close. If we paid attention to that list, we would not move anywhere beyond where we are now with the businesses that have already been shut down. I say this to make the point that either we are serious or we are not. Indeed, if your business is one that is going to be closed, it is going to mean tremendous economic hardship for you and your employees, but health comes first. And we all agree that the only way to stop the spread of the virus is by doing this nationwide shutdown.
The legal parameters as well as the technical details of the state of emergency are being fine-tuned ahead of the Governor General's assent to bring it into force. That declaration should be signed at the latest by Wednesday morning. The comprehensive nature of the latest statutory instrument takes into consideration the existing situation in San Pedro and will override the present SI governing the movement of persons on the island town. The state of emergency, however, can be lifted prior to its 30-day expiry if government is able to get a handle on the COVID-19 situation before then.
The new proclamation that should come out sometime later today or latest tomorrow morning, along with the regulations, will be the only ones that will exist for the entire country. These new regulations and the new proclamation will also apply to San Pedro, which, as everybody knows, has its own state of emergency. But since we're doing one for the entire country now, there's no need to do one just for San Pedro. The rules and regulations that we'll be putting down will apply to everywhere, including San Pedro. We're still finalizing them, as the Prime Minister said, because in fairness, we gave the CEOs and the opposition at around 10 to 11 last night to give them the documentation, and this morning we had some responses, including the responses from the legal advisor to the leader of the opposition. So we have to incorporate all of those and to ensure that the both parties are satisfied with what we plan to produce as the new set of regulations that will govern the state of emergency. But I think there are some basic premises that I think will be established, and I don't see any differing from or any difference of positions when it comes to fundamental issues that will govern the state of emergency. And the first one is that a curfew will be imposed for the entire country during the period of public emergency, which could, as the leader of the opposition said, it could last for the full 30 days, or if we believe we have a handle on the situation, it could be reduced.
Attorney General Michael Parafit expressly described a number of organizations and businesses that are considered essential services, which will be allowed to remain open during the day. He was also clear in stating that persons employed under any of these services can only traverse from home to work during these hours.
You can only move during the day. This is from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. to purchase essential needs, to attend medical or veterinary, to get attention, medical attention, medical emergencies, or you're an essential worker going to or from work. And you're not including in these are security guards patrolling, agricultural or factory workers, or other similar operations requiring the movement of personnel for the effective conduct of business or operations. You can do these during the non-curfew hours, but you must be moving for those purposes. If you're not moving for those purposes, you will be committing an offense under the Act. Now, an essential service is listed in the first schedule. These are the people who will be allowed to be out and about even during the curfew hours, which is, as we said, 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. the next day. Government offices, medical and auxiliary services, private security services, public utility workers, social workers authorized to respond to emergencies, sanitation workers, productive sectors, which involves people who have to produce agricultural products and potable water. Essential services are also the government offices, departments, statutory bodies, and state-owned companies. If they have to be open for that particular time during the curfew hours, they will be allowed to do so. Now, between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., fuel stations and fuel depots, public transportation providers, bakeries and tortilla factories, mills and other factories, farms, port operations and services connected with the loading and unloading of ships and aircrafts, delivery at and from ports.
A significant sum of money to be borrowed from at least 3 international financial institutions, including the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as the Central American Bank for Economic Integration, CABE, has been allocated for COVID-19 relief. Those funds are an aggregate of roughly $140 million and will in part also be dispersed in the health sector. This morning, Barrow gave an update on the sourcing of relief funds and the approximate time it will take for those monies to be made available to government.
There is the 2.5 million from Taiwan, that's for health. The 2 million that came from Kabe, that's for health. There's another loan that we're trying to get for Kabe, that's going to be for health. The IDB is making $13 million, 10% of the unspent country program, resources in the country program for Belize for this year. That's going to be made available for health. So you can see we're beyond $20 million, and that is why I was positive yesterday that Dr. Manza and his team will be absolutely adequately equipped. Yesterday, I thought that what I said would make its way to international ears, and that's why I complained about the fact that the international financial institutions are too absorbed in terms of the funding flows they will give to us, too completely focused on the health front, where we are already very much to the good. Well, I had an extremely productive phone call with Madam Tassin Syed Khan, who is the World Bank's country director for the entire Caribbean. And I'm very pleased to be able to announce, thanking her as I do so, that in consequence of that conversation, 21 million US dollars that was part of the CRIP program, the Climate Resilient Infrastructure Project program, 21 million US dollars will now be diverted. We had already been told that we can reprogram, but initially the decision was that it would have to go principally to health. All that will now be able to go for assistance to be put into the pot with the 75 million that we're borrowing from the central bank. That entire 21 million US dollars will be additionally put into the pot.
An initial budget of $900,000 was set aside to acquire medical equipment, such as ventilators and other medical supplies needed for the response to COVID-19. There were concerns that the health system did not have an adequate amount of ventilators to deal with any potential outbreak. But there are assurances that government's targets for COVID expenditure have been surpassed. Earlier today at the Prime Minister's press conference, Director of Health Services, Dr. Marvin Manzanero, reported that over $2.2 million have already been spent to acquire 2 ventilators, among other supplies, including personal protective equipment.
To date, we have spent in equipment, and I'll outline some of the equipment we have procured, $2,399,000 in terms of getting medical supplies and equipment. Out of that, $1,845,000 have been from government funds. In that, we have procured ventilators. There's a total now of 32 ventilators that are in that listing. We have procured beds. Some of those are mechanical beds to make it easier for clinicians to have manipulate and maneuver patients, particularly in ICU care. Portable X-ray machines. Portable ultrasounds, which is what health staff is requesting, particularly in the intensive care unit. PPEs, we got 4,500 PPEs, and we are projecting worst case scenario for the next 9 months. So we are in the process of finalizing procurement of that. We are getting PPEs over the next couple of weeks to be able to give to all the health staff, which I know has been a concern. Hazmat suits, particularly for people who are going to be dealing with patients in intensive care units. Portable thermometers, as I walked through Carl Huchner this morning, there's somebody checking your temperature as you walk in. Those have been procured and have started the distribution process across all health facilities. Houses to be able to do isolation around hospital compounds, that has started, and some of them the placement has started. Testing kits, we got a further 1,000 kits on Friday. We have pending 4,000 more test kits to arrive. We are looking at the possibility of eventually doing testing kits, the rapid test kits, to be able to do more community and 15-minute return time in terms of when you get those results. A backup PCR machine, which is what is being used for conducting testing at the Central Medical Lab. We have a list of pharmaceuticals, primarily for Carl Huchner, in terms of patients who would require ventilation support, because you know there's no specific treatment for COVID-19.
Dr. Manzanero says that the projection is that an additional $10 million will be needed in medical supplies to be fully prepared for a worst-case scenario. Earlier in his presentation, Dr. Manzanero spoke about having procured 32 ventilators that will be used at public health facilities for those persons having a more severe case of COVID-19. At present, the Carl Huchner Memorial Hospital has 10 ventilators, 6 of which are used in the intensive care unit of the facility, and the other 4 have been set up inside the isolation unit for COVID-19 patients. Dr. Manzanero breaks down the numbers. An additional 6 were expected to arrive in Belize on Monday, but there has been a delay.
I did say 10 at Carl Huchner. That's still 10, and we can go and check, right?
Okay.
6 are for the ICU that's been there for years, and I think we need to appreciate that that's what ventilation equipment we had. 4 are in the isolation unit for COVID-19, so that makes 10.
Okay.
Right? We had said 9 initially were coming, but only 6 were paid for in the first batch. That I haven't confirmed whether it got there yesterday. I'll have to go back to Carl Huchner. I did say initially that another were coming, but I can tell you 2 were from a specific supplier. I think yesterday I said 20, and 18 were from another supplier. So that's 20.
Okay.
But I can also add to your headache so you can do more math. 8 are coming from, now being offered from Bowen and Bowen, right?
Okay.
And they gave us, just this before I came here, I sent an email, which are going to be 4 that are for ICU and 4 for just ventilation support at the regional hospital. So when you add that, I think yesterday I also said 28. So that's why it's 6 that have been paid for, supposed to have arrived yesterday. 2 from a local supplier, 18 more, that's 20, plus 8 more that we got from a private company, right? And Carl Huchner has right now 10, 6 upstairs, 4 downstairs.
Director of Health Services, Dr. Manzanero, reported earlier today that as many as 103 tests have been conducted across the country to detect the presence of the novel coronavirus. Of those tests, only 3 have since returned positive. The most recent case involves a Belize City man who is recovering. He came from New York via Atlanta. Manzanero also provided an update on the state of affairs in San Pedro, which has been under a state of emergency since last Monday. According to the DHS, several persons were allowed to leave the island over the weekend, but another imminent will allow the Ministry of Health to get a better handle on the situation on Ambergris Key.
We are continuing to swab patients, and we are going to continue to now expand our testing across the country in terms of doing random testing for potential cases in the community. To date, we have done 103 tests now. 3 of those are the cases you all know are positive. Indeed, what Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition have said in terms of buying and procuring items, up to date, we have spent, I know initially we had talked about a budget of $900,000, but that's gone through the roof now, and I think we need to stress the support we have gotten in that regard. I know that some people came off the island Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, people who were ill and got trapped, if you will, on the island. Those were pre-screened by Dr. Canul and his team in San Pedro. I'm aware of people traveling, U.S. citizens that were on the island, and a flight that came to pick them up on Saturday and took them out. That flight went directly to the airport and they left country on Saturday. When we were asked, we said at least can we keep that lockdown, if you will, for the next 14 days to see what other else will happen. Some of the tests that were screened on Sunday were from San Pedro. They are negative. So I think by the end of this week, in terms of the health situation, we should have a better understanding to see if anybody else is developing sign symptom of those initially mapped on the list. I think after this weekend, contingent on the state of emergency now being declared here, we should have a better grasp in terms of the health situation.
Coming up, attorney Arthur Saldivar is spending a second night in a cell at the Bamapan police station, and a fisheries bust of lobster. Tonight, attorney Arthur Saldivar remains at the Belmopan police station in lockdown. Saldivar's legal woes began over a Facebook post over the weekend. He was held by the police and eventually released, but on Monday night, the long arms of the law were back at his house. The outspoken critic is now being detained for an unlicensed firearm, but he is yet to be charged, which means that he will spend night 2 in a cell. Dickie Bradley, the attorney for Saldivar, says that the detention is illegal and he will move the court to act. Here's News 5's Hippolyta Novello.
Controversial attorney Arthur Saldivar remains in a Belmopan holding cell tonight. He is being held on charges for an unlicensed firearm. His house was searched for hours by police officers on Monday, which led to his arrest. He has yet to be charged and sits in a jail cell where his attorney Richard Dickie Bradley repeatedly attempts to understand the delay.
The delay can be spelled in the word malice. It's just malicious. It is just a man who you can't muzzle, a man who has a history of speaking his mind, a man who is not afraid of controversy, a man who is not afraid of tackling anybody in high office.
Saldivar's legal woes started from a Facebook Live video which he did on Saturday, claiming that a UDP politician was facilitating the entry of a group of persons, including non-Belizeans, into the country via the northern border. He was arrested and charged for spreading false news. A day later, however, the government amended the quarantine measure, saying that any Belizean entering Belize from any country through any official port of entry or caught attempting to enter via a blind spot